The Nevada desert has a strange way of playing tricks on your eyes. Across endless miles of cracked earth and shimmering heat, distant mountains seem much closer than they really are. Long, lonely highways stretch toward the horizon, disappearing into a landscape that feels like it's guarding its own secrets. At first glance, it seems like a place where nothing ever happens. But hidden deep within this vast desert lies one of the most secretive military installations in American history. Not because people couldn't find it, but because, for decades, the U.S. government refused to officially acknowledge that it even existed. Today, the world knows it by a simple name: Area 51. Few places on Earth have inspired more curiosity, speculation, and controversy than this isolated corner of southern Nevada. For some, it's where the government studies extraterrestrial technology. For others, it's the ultimate symbol of America's deepest military secrets. Over the years, stories of unidentified flying objects, mysterious lights, experimental aircraft, and classified research have transformed Area 51 into a worldwide legend. But what if the real story is even more fascinating? Not because it proves extraordinary claims, but because it reveals something just as remarkable: how government secrecy can shape public imagination for generations. Maybe the greatest mystery surrounding Area 51 isn't what's hidden behind its fences. Maybe it's how an ordinary military testing facility became one of the most recognizable symbols of secrecy in modern history. To understand that story, we have to go back to a very different America. The year is 1955. World War II had ended only 10 years earlier, but another conflict was already underway, a conflict unlike any the world had ever seen. It wasn't fought on beaches or across battlefields. It was fought with intelligence, technology, surveillance, and information. The United States and the Soviet Union had entered what history would remember as the Cold War. Every scientific breakthrough mattered. Every military innovation had the potential to shift the balance of global power. And every unanswered question represented a possible threat to national security. American intelligence officials faced a challenge unlike anything they'd encountered before. They desperately needed accurate information about Soviet military bases, missile sites, and nuclear facilities. But getting that information wasn't easy. Spy satellites capable of taking detailed images from orbit didn't exist yet. Traditional reconnaissance aircraft could fly over enemy territory, but advances in radar and air defense systems made every mission more dangerous than the last. Pilots risked their lives simply to bring home photographs. Military leaders knew that couldn't continue forever. They needed an entirely new approach. Not a bigger airplane, not just a faster one, but an aircraft capable of flying so high that, for its time, it would remain beyond the reach of most enemy defenses. It sounded almost impossible, which made it exactly the kind of project that demanded absolute secrecy. Quietly, engineers, designers, and test pilots began working on one of the most ambitious aviation programs in American history. The result would become known as the U-2 spy plane. Unlike traditional military aircraft, the U-2 wasn't built for combat. It carried no bombs, no missiles. Its greatest advantage was altitude. Flying at heights never before achieved by operational aircraft, it could photograph vast areas of enemy territory while staying above many of the air defense systems of its day. For American intelligence, it was nothing short of revolutionary. But building something revolutionary required a place where no one was watching. The search eventually led military planners deep into the Nevada desert, far from major cities, far from commercial air traffic, far from curious eyes. There, they discovered an isolated dry lakebed known as Groom Lake. Surrounded by rugged mountains and hundreds of miles of empty desert, it offered something almost impossible to find anywhere else: distance, silence, and complete isolation. Construction began quietly. Temporary buildings appeared almost overnight. Runways slowly stretched across the dry lakebed. Small teams of engineers, mechanics, military personnel, and test pilots arrived aboard unmarked aircraft. Everyone involved understood one thing: what happened there would remain classified. Officially, almost nothing existed. Unofficially, one of the most advanced aviation research facilities in American history was beginning to take shape. At the time, almost no one outside the program knew what was happening beyond those distant mountains. And perhaps no one realized that the silence surrounding this isolated base would eventually become just as powerful as the technology being developed inside it. Because history has a remarkable pattern. The decision to build a secret testing facility at Groom Lake would quietly change the course of American aviation forever. Hidden deep within the Nevada desert, surrounded by rugged mountains and endless miles of empty land, the base operated far from public view. There were no highway signs pointing the way, no public announcements, no official acknowledgement. To everyone on the outside, it was just another empty patch of desert. But behind those heavily guarded gates, history was being written. Every morning, small groups of engineers, mechanics, test pilots, and military personnel arrived to work on projects that officially didn't exist. Many of them couldn't even tell their own families where they worked. Their schedules were classified, their missions were classified. Even the aircraft they were building and testing were classified. Secrecy wasn't just encouraged, it was absolutely essential. During the Cold War, information had become one of America's most valuable weapons. If the Soviet Union discovered America's newest aircraft before they were ready for deployment, years of research and billions of taxpayer dollars could disappear overnight. The fewer people who knew, the safer the mission remained. That philosophy shaped everything happening at Groom Lake. The first major breakthrough came with the legendary U-2 spy plane. When it entered service, it completely transformed aerial intelligence. Flying at altitudes no other operational aircraft could reach, it photographed military installations that had been impossible to monitor before. For intelligence analysts in Washington, those images provided information that satellites simply couldn't deliver, because advanced spy satellites didn't exist yet. The success of the U-2 proved something remarkable. The impossible could become reality. But technology never stands still. As radar systems improved around the world, military planners realized that flying higher would no longer be enough. The next generation of aircraft would have to fly faster, higher, and remain even more secret. That challenge led to one of the most extraordinary aircraft ever created, the A-12. Developed in complete secrecy by Lockheed's legendary Skunk Works division, the A-12 looked unlike anything the world had ever seen. Its long, razor-sharp fuselage, its sleek, futuristic design, its distinctive black finish. Everything about it looked decades ahead of its time. Many of the groundbreaking technologies developed for the A-12 would later help create another aircraft that became famous around the world, the SR-71 Blackbird. Even today, decades after its retirement, the Blackbird remains one of the fastest air-breathing aircraft ever built. Its speed was astonishing. Its altitude was unmatched. Its engineering pushed the limits of what seemed possible during the 1960s. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating. Imagine living in a small town somewhere in the American Southwest during those years. Late one evening, you step outside. High above the desert sky, something streaks overhead. It doesn't look like any passenger airplane you've ever seen. Its shape is unlike anything you've ever imagined. Its speed seems almost impossible, and just seconds later, it's gone. You tell your neighbors what you saw. Soon, other people begin sharing similar stories. Some describe strange lights moving silently across the sky. Others report bizarre aircraft with designs that seem impossible. But no official explanation ever comes. From the public's perspective, these sightings remain complete mysteries. Years later, many of those once secret aircraft are finally revealed. Photographs are released. Government documents are declassified. Aircraft that once seemed impossible are suddenly sitting inside museums for everyone to see. Looking back, many of those mysterious sightings become much easier to understand. Not because every story has an explanation, but because history proves that ordinary Americans were sometimes witnessing technology their own government wasn't ready to reveal. And that's an important distinction. Real secrecy can create real mystery. When official information doesn't exist, human imagination naturally fills in the blanks. Over time, Area 51 became much more than a military base. It became an American legend, a place where silence fueled speculation, and every unanswered question inspired an even bigger one. By the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s, the legend of Area 51 had already taken on a life of its own. Not because extraordinary evidence had surfaced, but because almost no official information existed. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't created by what people know. They're created by what people are never allowed to see. As the years went by, Area 51 became far more than just another classified military installation. It became one of America's greatest mysteries, and with each passing decade, the legend only grew stronger. The most unusual part wasn't that people believed something secret was happening. It was that the US government had almost nothing to say about it. Year after year, official silence continued. Then, years turned into decades. Behind the fences, thousands of military personnel, engineers, and civilian contractors came to work every single day. Aircraft arrived, aircraft departed. New hangars appeared across the desert. Runways were expanded. The facility continued to grow. Yet, officially, it was almost as if the base didn't exist. For many Americans, that contradiction was impossible to ignore. How could a place employing thousands of people remain almost completely absent from public conversation? Curiosity spread far beyond the Nevada desert. Investigative journalists began asking difficult questions. Researchers searched through public records. Authors published books. Television specials introduced Area 51 to millions of viewers across the United States, and eventually around the world. With every unanswered question, the mystery became even bigger. By the late 1980s, Area 51 had evolved from a secret military base into a true American legend. Then came another turning point. A man named Bob Lazar stepped into the spotlight. He claimed he had worked at a facility near Area 51, where the US government was studying highly advanced technology unlike anything publicly known. His interviews spread across television, radio, and newspapers, capturing worldwide attention almost overnight. According to Lazar, the government wasn't simply testing experimental aircraft. He claimed it was attempting to reverse engineer vehicles far beyond known aviation technology. It was one of the most extraordinary stories ever connected to Area 51, and almost immediately, it became one of the most controversial. Supporters believed his testimony finally explained decades of secrecy surrounding the base. Skeptics argued that many of his claims have never been independently verified, and important parts of his educational and employment history remain disputed. Even today, people remain deeply divided. Some believe he revealed hidden truths. Others believe the evidence simply isn't there. But regardless of where you stand, one fact is undeniable. Bob Lazar permanently changed the way the world viewed Area 51. From that moment on, it was no longer seen as just another secret military installation. For millions of people, it became the center of countless theories about what might exist behind its heavily guarded fences. At the same time, a completely different source of curiosity began to emerge: satellite imagery. For the first time, commercially available satellite photos allowed ordinary people to look down on the isolated Nevada facility from space. They revealed long runways stretching across the desert, massive aircraft hangars, taxiways, security checkpoints, and an ever-expanding complex hidden in the middle of nowhere. Those images confirmed something important. Area 51 was absolutely real. But they also revealed surprisingly little about what actually happened inside. The photographs answered one question, while creating dozens more. Then, in 2013, history took another significant turn. Previously classified government documents, released through public records requests, officially acknowledged Area 51's role in testing legendary aircraft such as the U-2 spy plane and the A-12. For aviation historians, it was a landmark moment, not because it confirmed extraordinary theories, but because it confirmed something just as fascinating. For decades, one of America's most important aviation programs had operated almost entirely outside public knowledge. The newly released documents filled in many missing chapters of history, but they didn't answer every question, and perhaps they never will. Governments rarely declassify every detail of sensitive national security programs. Some information remains secret for years. Others stay classified for decades, and in some cases, even longer. That reality naturally leaves room for speculation. But history also teaches us an important lesson. There is a difference between documented classified research and the stories people build around that secrecy. Those are not the same thing. The existence of classified military programs is a matter of historical record. Extraordinary claims about those programs require extraordinary evidence. Understanding that distinction changes the way we think about Area 51. Instead of asking, "Does this prove every rumor we've ever heard?" a better question might be, what can decades of documented secrecy teach us about how governments develop the next generation of military technology? Because sometimes, history eventually reveals answers that once seemed impossible. And sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't created by extraordinary discoveries. They're created by something much simpler: silence. By now, a very different picture begins to come into focus. Not a story about aliens, not a story about impossible technology, but a story about secrecy itself. History has shown us time and time again that the US government is capable of keeping military projects hidden for astonishingly long periods of time. The Manhattan Project remained one of the best-kept secrets of World War II. The U-2 spy plane flew classified missions for years before most Americans even knew it existed. The A-12 ox cart was designed, built, and tested almost entirely behind closed doors. And the F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter entered service long before the public realized stealth technology had become a reality. None of these programs belonged in science fiction. Yet before they were officially revealed, every one of them would have sounded almost unbelievable. That raises an interesting question. Maybe the greatest mystery has never been the technology itself. Maybe it's always been the silence surrounding it. Human beings have a fascinating relationship with missing information. When every question has a clear answer, curiosity fades. But when pieces of the puzzle are missing, our minds naturally begin filling in the blanks. We search for patterns. We connect unrelated details. We imagine possibilities. We try to explain what we can't fully understand. Psychologists call this pattern recognition. It's one of the traits that helped humans survive and solve problems throughout history. But it's also one of the reasons mysteries become so powerful. Area 51 became the perfect example. People occasionally witnessed unusual aircraft crossing the Nevada sky. Official explanations were often non-existent. The government remained silent. News stories spread. Books filled store shelves. Television documentaries introduced the mystery to millions of viewers, and with every unanswered question, another theory was born. Eventually, the legend became even bigger than the base itself. What's especially fascinating is that Area 51 wasn't unique. Throughout history, highly classified military aircraft have often been mistaken for something extraordinary. During the Cold War, experimental aircraft displayed flight characteristics the public had never seen before, flying higher than any commercial airplane, traveling at incredible speeds, reflecting sunlight in strange and unexpected ways. To someone watching from the ground, those aircraft could easily seem impossible. Years later, after many of those programs were declassified, at least some of those mysterious sightings suddenly made a lot more sense. Not every report, but enough to remind historians of something important. Today's mystery can become tomorrow's history. That doesn't explain every unanswered question, and it certainly doesn't prove every extraordinary claim. Instead, it reveals something even more compelling. Reality is often fascinating enough all by itself. Innovation rarely happens in public. Military breakthroughs are almost never developed in front of television cameras. They're designed in secret, tested in secret, refined in secret, and sometimes they remain hidden for decades. Looking at Area 51 through that lens changes the conversation. Instead of asking, "Is every rumor true?" Maybe the better question is, why does secrecy create so many rumors in the first place? Because secrecy doesn't just protect information, it changes the way people think. It invites speculation. It fuels imagination. And over time, stories naturally begin filling the empty spaces where facts don't yet exist. Maybe that's the real reason Area 51 continues to capture our imagination generation after generation. Not because people expect simple answers, but because unanswered questions have an incredible way of surviving. Long after the news headlines fade, long after the aircraft find their way into museums, the mystery remains. And perhaps that was always the most fascinating part of the story. By now, it's easy to understand why Area 51 became much more than a secret military base. It became an idea, a symbol, a place where the known world meets the limits of what the public is allowed to know. For decades, people have asked the same question. What's really happening behind those gates? But maybe that's never been the most interesting question. History points us toward something even more fascinating. Why do certain places become legendary, while others quietly disappear from public memory? Area 51 isn't the only classified facility in American history. It isn't the only place where cutting-edge technology has been developed. And it's certainly not the only military installation protected by extraordinary security. Yet almost no other location has captured America's imagination quite like this one. Part of the answer lies in timing. The Cold War was an era when secrecy wasn't optional. It was considered essential to national security. Entire aircraft programs were hidden from public view. Engineers spent years solving problems the outside world didn't even know existed. Test pilots flew machines that looked decades ahead of their time. And every so often, someone on the ground caught a brief glimpse of one of those aircraft crossing the Nevada sky. Without an official explanation, people naturally searched for one themselves. That's how stories begin. Some of those stories were eventually confirmed by declassified government documents. Others remain impossible to verify. And some have become part of American folklore. Separating fact from speculation has never been easy. And that's exactly what makes Area 51 so fascinating. Its history reminds us that secrecy and imagination often grow side by side. The less people know, the more possibilities they begin to imagine. But maybe the greatest lesson has very little to do with experimental aircraft, or classified military bases, or even the Cold War itself. Maybe the real lesson is about history. History is never truly finished. It's constantly being rewritten as new evidence comes to light. Every decade, forgotten files are declassified. Old photographs emerge from government archives. Former engineers and military personnel finally speak about projects they once couldn't even acknowledge. Events that once seemed impossible gradually become accepted historical fact. Again and again, history reminds us that yesterday's top-secret program can become tomorrow's museum exhibit. Not because the truth changed, but because enough time passed for the truth to finally be told. Looking at Area 51 through that lens changes everything. Instead of asking, "Is every extraordinary story true?" maybe we should ask something else. How much of today's technological progress is unfolding quietly, hidden from public view, just as it has throughout American history? The answer is probably less mysterious than science fiction would have us believe, but no less remarkable. Because somewhere, right now, engineers, scientists, and military researchers are almost certainly developing technologies the rest of the world won't fully understand for years, maybe even decades. Most of those projects will never become legends. Some may quietly shape the future, and a few may remain classified long enough to inspire an entirely new generation of speculation. Perhaps that's the true legacy of Area 51. Not proof of extraordinary stories, but proof that secrecy has the power to turn ordinary places into extraordinary legends. As the sun sets behind the mountains surrounding Groom Lake, the desert grows quiet once again. The runways are still there. The hangars are still there. The security fences are still there. And somewhere beyond them, the work continues, just as it has for generations. Most of it will never make the evening news. Much of it may never become public at all. And maybe that's exactly the point. Because history has always been written in two chapters. The chapter we're allowed to read today, and the chapter that remains locked away until tomorrow. Maybe the real mystery of Area 51 has never been what's hidden behind its fences. Maybe the real mystery is how many chapters of history are still waiting to be revealed. And perhaps, years from now, when another generation looks back at our own time, they'll discover that the greatest secrets weren't hidden because they were impossible to understand. They were hidden simply because history wasn't ready to tell their story. Until then, the Nevada desert remains exactly as it has always been. Silent, endless, patient, waiting. Thank you for watching American Uncovered. If you're fascinated by forgotten history, hidden places, secret military programs, and the untold stories that shaped America, be sure to subscribe and join us for our next investigation. Because sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't the ones we solve.